The notification hits my phone while I'm standing in the grocery checkout line. I almost don't look at it. I've been trying to be better about my phone. So when it buzzes against my palm, I hesitate before turning the screen over. Withdrawal, $48,260.13. I read it once, then again, then a third time, slower, like reading it differently might produce a different number. It doesn't. The woman behind me is shifting her weight. The conveyor belt is moving. The cashier is looking at me with that particular expression of someone waiting for their line to stop being held up. I don't process any of it. $48,260.13. That is not a number from a world where everything is fine. That is a number from a different world entirely, one where something has gone very wrong very fast. I check the account name. It's ours, the joint one. The one we opened in year 2 of our marriage when we decided it made sense to consolidate, to plan together, to build something shared. The authorized withdrawal was completed by the account co-holder, my husband. I step out of the line. My grocery basket tips as I move and I don't stop to write it. I hear oranges rolling across the tile behind me. I don't go back for them. The second notification arrives before I reach the parking lot. Savings transfer complete. I stop walking. I am standing in the automatic door of the grocery store, the sensor holding it open, a cold draft from outside hitting me in the face, and I open the banking app with hands that are starting to shake in a specific way, not dramatically, just the fine motor tremor of a body that has received information it doesn't know what to do with yet. The savings account, the one we fed for 12 years, with tax refunds and birthday money and the months we chose the cheaper version of something because we had a goal. The mortgage buffer. The emergency fund, 12 years of accumulated discipline. Balance, $0. The number has that particular blankness of something that should not be possible. Like seeing a clock with no hands. Like a sentence with no ending. I scroll back through the transaction history. The transfers happened in sequence. Joint checking, savings, a third account I almost don't recognize, an account I remember from years ago that I thought had been closed. All gone. All completed within the same 40-minute window. 40 minutes while I was buying milk and oranges and the good sourdough bread because I had been planning a real dinner. 40 minutes. I call him from the parking lot. 2 rings. Voicemail. His voice, warm and completely ordinary, tells me to leave a message. I hang up. I call again. 1 ring. Voicemail. The third time it doesn't ring at all. Straight to voicemail. Which means either the phone is off or he declined the call, and both of those options are telling me something I am not ready to hear. I text. Where are you? Then, call me. Then, please call me right now, something is wrong with our accounts. The messages said delivered, not read. I stand in the parking lot and I look at my car, our second car, the one I drive, the one that needs new rear tires and that I keep meaning to schedule and that now I am thinking about in the specific urgent way you think about practical things when your brain is trying to find solid ground. Someone walks past me with a cart full of groceries and smiles and I must smile back because she doesn't stop to ask if I'm okay, which means whatever is on my face is not as obvious as it feels. I get in the car. I open the banking app again and this time I let myself understand what I am actually seeing. This is not fraud. That is the first thing I have to accept, and it takes longer than it should. Fraud would be fixable, a phone call, a report, a process with steps. Fraud would be something that happened to us, not something he did to me. But the transaction log is clear. The withdrawal was authorized by an account co-holder using the correct credentials at a branch location. The branch is 40 minutes from our house, in a direction he doesn't typically drive, which tells me he chose it deliberately. The timestamp is 11:42 in the morning, which was a Tuesday when I thought he was at work. He wasn't at work. He was at a bank branch 40 minutes away, presenting his credentials, authorizing the withdrawal of every dollar we had built together over 12 years of marriage. He signed for it. He walked out with it. And then he went somewhere I don't know, and turned off his phone, and disappeared. I keep trying to find the version of this that has an innocent explanation. The version where there's a reason. An emergency. Some terrible thing that required this specific action right now without a call, without a warning, without even a text. I can't find that version. I try for a long time. I cannot find it. Before I tell you what happened in the 72 hours that followed, let me tell you who I am. My name is Mara Calloway. I am 43 years old. I was married to a man named Derek Calloway for 12 years. I am a licensed bookkeeper and financial administrator with 16 years of experience maintaining records, tracking transactions, and building organized documentation that most people find tedious and I find clarifying. My husband emptied our joint account and disappeared. 72 hours later, he found out what he missed. I kept our household accounts with the same discipline I applied to my clients' books. Every expense logged, every transfer documented, savings goals tracked monthly. I set up automated alerts on both our accounts years ago, the kind that notify you of any transaction over $500. Because I am someone who believes in knowing where the money is. Derek was not interested in the details of our financial life. He knew the general shape and trusted me with the specifics. This is not unusual in marriages. What is unusual, what I would not learn until the 72 hours were over, was how much that arrangement had worked in my favor without my ever planning it that way. He took what he could reach. He didn't know what he couldn't. The marriage didn't break on a Tuesday afternoon in a grocery store parking lot. It had been breaking for at least a year. Probably longer. The kind of breaking that happens slowly and then all at once, where you look back afterward and can see the cracks that were always there and wonder how you missed them while you were living inside them. Derek and I had been good once. I want to say that because it's true. The early years were real. We built something genuine, a life we were both proud of, a stability that mattered, a partnership I believed in. What I didn't see coming, what I kept not seeing, year after year, as the thing we had became something else, was the slow, quiet way that Derek had started treating our shared life as something he deserved rather than something we built. In the way of a man who stops saying thank you, who absorbs the work of a household without acknowledging it, who begins to believe that the comfort around him exists because of him rather than for him. He became someone who thought he was carrying the marriage when the marriage was carrying him. I didn't understand this until I was sitting in a parking lot staring at a zero balance. The late nights started in year 10. Not dramatically, Derek was not the type for drama. He was the type for gradual, barely perceptible shifts that you adjust to without realizing you've adjusted. He would be home later. The explanation was always work, a project, a client call that ran over, traffic. Plausible, individually reasonable. I noticed. I'm someone who notices things. But noticing and acting are different, and for a long time I stayed in the noticing without moving to the acting because I was afraid of what acting might reveal. By year 11 the explanations had gotten thin. Still plausible if you needed them to be, but thin. I stopped needing them to be plausible around the time I found a receipt in a coat pocket that didn't match anything I knew about. I didn't confront him. I know this is the part where people wonder why. Why didn't I say something? Why didn't I push? Because I had built a life and I was not ready to watch it come down, and because the only thing more frightening than suspecting your husband is lying to you is having that suspicion confirmed out loud. So I stayed quiet, I stayed watchful, and I kept doing what I always do, I kept records. The money conversations changed in the last year. Before that, we talked about finances the way functional couples do. Regularly, honestly, making joint decisions about larger purchases and savings goals. Then Derek started getting tight when money came up. Not angry, not dramatic, just tight. A kind of controlled blankness that would descend when I brought up the accounts. Short answers, quick subject changes, an efficiency to his responses that felt less like someone being organized and more like someone managing what they shared. I noticed that the automatic deposit of his paycheck, which had come into the joint account every 2 weeks for 9 years, had been redirected. He told me the company had changed their payroll system and he was sorting it out. That was 8 months ago. I was still waiting for it to be sorted out when he emptied the account. I also noticed, around month 7, that he had started asking more questions about how our accounts were organized. Not in the way of someone getting more involved in the household finances. In the way of someone taking inventory. Which accounts? What balances? Whose name? I answered honestly. I wish I had understood sooner what he was doing with those answers. He was mapping what he planned to take. In year 9, Derek started saying it was easier if he handled certain things. Not money, he wasn't interested in spreadsheets or tracking. But the larger decisions, the car insurance provider, the investment account he opened in his name only, which he explained as a tax strategy. The retirement account adjustment he made without consulting me and presented as already done. I let these things happen. Not out of weakness, I want to be clear about that. I let them happen because I was busy and I trusted him, and the things he took over felt like tasks lifted off my plate, which can feel like partnership even when it isn't. What I didn't understand, in those years, was that he was building a version of our shared life in which more and more of the structure was in his name or under his control. Not all of it, not the parts one handled. But the visible, obvious parts, the parts you'd think of if someone asked you what assets a married couple had. He was separating the wires while the lights were still on. I didn't know it was happening. Then he flipped the switch. And I discovered that I had been living in a house he didn't own as much of as he thought. The trust was real. I want to be honest about this, because the comfortable narrative afterward is that I should have known, that the signs were obvious, that a more careful person would have caught it. And maybe that's true, but the trust was also real. When you spend 12 years building something with someone, navigating hard years and coming out intact, that creates a specific kind of faith. Not blind faith, the reasonable faith of someone who has evidence that the person beside them is worth trusting. Derek had given me that evidence for years. The evidence was not the whole truth, it turned out. But it felt like the whole truth while I was inside it. What I had failed to account for, what I think most betrayed people fail to account for, is that a person can be genuinely trustworthy in some areas of a life while being entirely capable of cruelty in others. The trust you build in the good years doesn't protect you from what they decide to do in the bad ones. I trusted him. He used that trust to map our finances and find the cleanest exit. Both of these things are true at the same time. That is possibly the hardest part of all of this to sit with. By year 11, Derek had stopped including me in things. This happened so gradually I kept mistaking it for the normal distance-long marriages accumulate. He stopped sharing what happened at work. He stopped asking about my clients. Our evenings became parallel, two people in the same house, occasionally intersecting for meals. I had suggested a trip. He agreed and then let the planning stall until the window passed. I had suggested counseling, once, carefully. He said we didn't need it and changed the subject, and I didn't push because pushing had started to feel like shouting into fog. I kept doing the work of the household. Paying the bills, tracking the accounts, managing the insurance and the utilities and the property tax payments and the quarterly bookkeeping for our shared expenses. I kept doing it because I had always done it and because some part of me believed that if I kept the infrastructure of our life functioning perfectly, the other parts might eventually correct themselves. That is how you become the person who maintains a house for someone who is already planning to leave it. I didn't know that was what I was doing. I thought I was keeping the marriage alive. I was actually just keeping the lights on while he figured out his exit. I drive home from the parking lot in a specific kind of shock. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the kind where your body continues to function, hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, stopping at lights, while your brain is doing something else entirely, running calculations it can't finish because it doesn't have all the numbers yet. I pull into the driveway and sit in the car for a moment. The house looks normal. Same gray paint I chose when we moved in. Same overgrown flower beds. Same front step. Normal. I go inside. His closet is the first thing I check, because something in me already knows. The door is open. Half the hangers are empty. Not packed in a hurry. The remaining clothes are spaced evenly, the way they'd fall if things were carefully removed one at a time. He planned this. His bathroom counter is clean. No toothbrush. No razor. None of the small items that make a person's presence real. His laptop bag is gone. I stand in the doorway and look at the half-empty closet, the bare counter, the made bed. I made it that morning, the last ordinary thing, and I feel the specific cold of understanding something you cannot unfeel. He was already gone before he left. The first night is the worst. I sit on the kitchen floor because for some reason I end up there. I don't remember deciding to sit on the floor, I just find myself there, with my back against the cabinet and my phone in my hand and the banking app still open on the zero balance screen. I call my sister, Vonda. She answers in 2 rings. I tell her what happened, the notifications, the voicemails, the closet, the counter, and she is quiet in the specific way Vonda gets when working hard not to say the first thing she wants to say. Are you safe? She asks. I tell her I'm safe. Just very not okay. She tells me she's coming. I tell her I need to think first, alone, and she accepts this. Call me every hour, she says. I promise. I sit on the floor. Rent is due in 11 days. The utility auto payments pull from the joint account. The car insurance too. Every automatic payment is set up to pull from a place that now holds nothing. I think about this practically. Not because I am not calm, but because panic is not useful and I am, under everything, a person who knows how to work a problem. The fear is real and I want to name it correctly. It is not the dramatic fear of movies. It is the quiet, procedural fear of someone looking at a spreadsheet and doing math that doesn't work. Rent, $2,100. Due in 11 days. Utilities, 4 auto payments totaling approximately $380. Due at various points in the next 3 weeks. Car insurance, $174. Due in 9 days. Health insurance through the marketplace, $610. Due in 6 days. Grocery money, effectively zero. Available funds in my personal account, the one Derek knew about but hadn't touched because it had never held more than a few thousand. $3,247. That number is both terrifying and clarifying. Terrifying because it is not enough. Clarifying because it is something. I am not starting from nothing. I am starting from $3,247 and 12 years of knowing how to manage money carefully, and whatever else I am about to discover when I start looking properly. I make a list. Bills, amounts, due dates, income I am expecting from 2 clients in the next 10 days. The list takes me 45 minutes. By the end I am still scared, but I am scared of specific things, and specific things can be addressed. I make a second list of who I need to call in the morning. For about 20 minutes somewhere around 2 a.m., I almost give in. Not to despair exactly, more to the specific gravity of a situation that feels too large to work through alone, at night, in a house that suddenly has a different shape now that half of its furniture belongs to a story that is over. I think about calling Derek. Not because I believe he'll answer, but because part of me is still living in the version of this where there's an explanation, where this has a reason that, while not good, is at least not what it appears to be. I pick up my phone. I look at his name in my contacts. I put the phone back down. Because the account was not emptied by accident. The closet was not cleared by accident. The plan he executed on a Tuesday at 11:42 a.m. was not a misunderstanding I can talk him out of. He chose this. Every step of it. I do not call him. Instead I get up off the floor and go to my office, the small room I use for client work, with the filing cabinet and the good desk lamp and the organized quality of a space that belongs entirely to me. I sit down. I open my laptop. I start looking. The shift that happens in the next few hours is not strength in the dramatic sense. It is something quieter and more real, the specific shift of a person coming out of shock, not because the situation has improved but because shock has a ceiling and what's on the other side is clarity. I am a bookkeeper. 16 years. My entire professional life is built on the ability to look at financial records without flinching, find the patterns, understand what documents say and what they legally mean. I have been treating our personal financial life as though it is entirely separate from these skills. It isn't. I open the financial folder on my laptop. The one I maintain for household accounts, organized by year, with subfolders for insurance, taxes, bank statements, and property. I have been maintaining this folder since year 3 of the marriage because that is simply how I operate. I cannot help organizing things. It is not a strategy. It is a reflex. But a reflex I maintained for 12 years becomes a record. And a record, I am about to discover, is the most powerful thing in the world when someone believes they have taken everything from you. I start at the most recent folder and I work backward. The alert history is the first thing that matters. I set up the account alerts in year 4, after a client's business account was compromised and I saw what better notification settings could have prevented. I went home and set up alerts on all our accounts. Anything over $500. Any external transfer. Any new payee added. Derek knew the alerts existed. What he didn't think through was that they create a record, not just a notification, but a logged, time-stamped trail of every flagged transaction that can be exported, printed, and presented. I export the history. 12 years of alerts. The last page covers the Tuesday transfers in complete, time-stamped, sequentially documented detail. This is, in legal terms, exactly the kind of record that financial institutions and family law attorneys find extremely useful. I print it. I add it to the folder I am building on my desk. Then I keep looking, because the alert history is only the beginning. It tells me what happened and when. What I need to understand next is the full picture of what he took and, more importantly, what he overlooked. Because he overlooked something, I can feel it in the way the numbers don't quite add up to everything they should. I keep working. The account he didn't touch was the one I almost forgot I had. I had opened it in year 5 to manage client retainer payments separately, a clean separation for tax purposes my accountant recommended. It was in my name only. Derek knew it existed. I mentioned it when I set it up. What he apparently hadn't done was check what was currently in it. I hadn't looked in a few months either, client retainers coming in, reinvested into the business, not tracked closely. I look now. The number is larger than I expected. Not life-changing on its own, but larger than the $3,247 in my personal account and significantly larger than what Derek presumably believed I had access to, given the assumption he seemed to be operating on, that I was dependent on our joint accounts. I was not dependent on our joint accounts. I was using them because they were there and that was how we had structured things. The structural assumption he made, that emptying the joint accounts would strand me, was based on a version of our finances that was incomplete. He had mapped the visible parts and missed the part that mattered most because I had maintained it so quietly, so professionally, that it never appeared on his radar. I sit with that for a moment. The documents are where the real picture lives. I have a folder, physical and digital, labeled simply House. Inside it, the original mortgage agreement, the title documentation, our homeowner's insurance policy, and every amendment and renewal going back to the day we closed on the property. I pull out the title document. I read the ownership structure. When we bought the house 9 years ago, I handled the closing paperwork. Derek attended but didn't review the documents in detail. The title is held in both our names. What's not standard is the specific tenancy arrangement I selected after researching options, one that offered better protections in specific legal circumstances. I read the relevant clause. Then I read it again. Derek, in his planning of this exit, had apparently assumed that the house was a jointly controlled asset that would require lengthy negotiation in any legal proceeding. He was right that it would require a legal proceeding. He was wrong about the specific protections that proceeding would trigger. I add the title document to my growing folder. Then I call my sister Vonda back, even though it's almost 3 a.m. And when she answers I tell her I need the name of the best family law attorney she knows. She gives me 2 names. I write them both down. By the time the sun comes up I have a folder 3 inches thick. Not because I manufactured anything overnight. Because I retrieved what already existed, 12 years of organized, careful record-keeping that I had maintained without ever planning it for this purpose. The alert history. Account statements printed monthly going back 6 years. Tax returns for the last 8 years. The mortgage documents. The title. The insurance policies. Every major home improvement expenditure organized by year and contractor. Also in the folder, a printed copy of the receipt I had found in Derek's coat pocket 14 months ago and had photographed and saved to a cloud folder labeled MISC without knowing exactly why. And a printed log of 12 months of the checking account transactions, which I had been keeping as part of my household bookkeeping habit. Taken together, this folder represents a financial and documentary record of our marriage that most family law attorneys would describe as comprehensive. Derek did not know this folder existed because he did not know I maintained it. He knew I was organized. He did not understand what organized meant at the level one practiced it. He took the money and thought he was taking the foundation. He left the foundation. He took the decorations. I meet with the attorney at 9 in the morning. Her name is Cressida Fontaine, 22 years in family law, which I know because I looked her up at 4 a.m. and read everything publicly available before calling and leaving a message on the firm's emergency line. She calls back at 8:15. I bring the folder. She reviews the documents quickly, with focused attention that moves through the pages like water finding a path. She pauses at the alert history. Pauses longer at the title document. Makes a note. When she finishes the first pass, she puts her pen down. When did the withdrawal occur? She asks. Yesterday at 11:42 a.m., I say. The timestamps are on page 4. And you have no communication from him since? Nothing after the voicemail message at 11:58 a.m. that I did not pick up in time. He left a voicemail? I have the recording, I say. I had listened to it twice in the night. It said nothing useful, just his voice saying he was sorry and that he needed to do this and that he hoped I would understand eventually. She looks at me. You have more documentation than most clients bring me after months of preparation, she says. I'm a bookkeeper, I say. She nods. We're filing today, she says. The next 24 hours are the most focused I have ever been in my life. Cressida files the emergency motion that morning. Given the documented, time-stamped nature of the withdrawal, she moves quickly on asset preservation. The house, the investment account Derek opened in his name, but that falls within marital assets given our timeline. Certain financial vehicles I hadn't even remembered to mention that she identified from the tax returns. I call the bank's fraud and dispute line. Not because the withdrawal was fraudulent in the technical sense, it wasn't, he was an authorized account holder, but because certain aspects of the transaction trigger specific regulatory obligations on the bank's part, which I know because I have spent 16 years working with business accounts and I understand what banks are required to do when presented with certain documentation. I file the reports that need to be filed. I contact my 2 largest clients to discuss payment timing. I contact my accountant. I call my utility companies and explain the situation and request a 14-day payment accommodation, which 2 of the 4 grant immediately and the 3rd offers in modified form. Each call is a small thing. Together they are a structure. I am building the structure while he is somewhere believing I am falling apart. I am not falling apart. The 72 hours end on a Friday morning. I know they've ended because that's when I hear from Cressida that the emergency motion has been granted and the relevant assets have been legally encumbered pending the formal proceedings. She explains what this means in terms that I mostly already understand and a few that I need her to explain twice. In practical terms, the house cannot be sold or transferred without a court order. The investment account cannot be liquidated. The joint financial history is now part of a legal record independent of whatever Derek is planning. He has also, apparently, attempted to access one of the accounts I had not thought about, an old savings certificate from year 3 of our marriage that had auto-renewed several times and that I had listed in the tax documentation. He was not able to access it. Cressida tells me his attorney has reached out. He has an attorney? I ask. He retained one yesterday, she says. Which means he's been found. I sit with that for a moment. He tried to disappear. He didn't disappear cleanly. The bank transaction at a physical branch. The voicemail. The documentation that already existed in my files before he made a single move. He planned his exit carefully, without fully understanding the woman he was exiting. He sends a message through his attorney 10 days after the withdrawal. It is a proposed settlement offer, which Cressida describes with the neutral tone of someone who has learned not to editorialize. The offer assumes I have access only to the joint account, which is gone, and my personal account. It proposes a settlement based on that assumption. It does not account for the business account. It does not account for the house equity position, which the title arrangement protects in ways he did not anticipate. It does not account for the documented financial history, 12 years of records establishing my contribution to every asset he believes he controls. The offer is built on an incomplete map. He made the map by asking me those careful questions a year ago, which accounts, what balances, whose name. And I answered honestly. But the map he built from those answers missed the things I had never thought to mention because they had never seemed relevant. The business account I built over 16 years. The title arrangement I made at closing. The folder I had maintained without purpose, out of pure professional habit, that turned out to be the most important thing in the room. He thought he took everything. He took what he could see. I don't go after Derek with anger. I want to be clear about that, because the satisfying version of this story would have me hunting him down and delivering some devastating speech in a dramatic setting. That is not what happens. The legal process moves the way legal processes move, slowly at first, then with increasing momentum as the documentation speaks for itself. Cressida has everything she needs because I gave it to her in a 3-inch folder on a Thursday morning. Derek wanted to take the money and disappear into a life he'd been building while I was maintaining ours. He didn't account for the trail. He didn't account for the house. He didn't account for the business account or the title arrangement or the 12 years of printed statements or the alert history or the voicemail he left at 11:58 a.m. on the day he drove to a bank branch 40 minutes away and signed for the withdrawal. He didn't account for me. Not the wife who kept the house running and managed the accounts. The version underneath, the one building skills and records and professional competence for 16 years. The one that did not fall apart in the parking lot. The one that sat on a kitchen floor and made a list and then got up and started working. He thought he was leaving. He found out he was found.